The town of Arboga, Sweden. A place where the calendar seems too slow, caught between the ancient history of its stone churches and the pristine quiet of its winter streets. It is the epitome of Scandinavian peace. For Emma Jangestig, the quietude was home. At just 23, she had a beautiful, normal life. A life overflowing with the pure, uncomplicated joy of young children. There was Max, 3 years old, a whirlwind of energy and endless questions. And there was little Saga, just a year old, the newest light in the small terraced house. With Emma's partner, Torgny Helgren, their world was complete. It was the haven of warmth and safety. They had everything. They had security. They had routine. What they didn't know was that, for months, their peace had been watched. Their happiness had been tallied. Their perfect, unsuspecting world was about to be invaded by a pure, cold malice. A darkness that had traveled 2,000 miles across the continent, drawn by the single toxic thread of jealousy. The monster was already at the door. They just couldn't see the shadow she cast. The fuse for this explosion was lit 2 years earlier, in 2006, on the Greek island of Crete. This is where Emma's future partner, Torgny Helgren, enjoyed a brief holiday romance with a German woman named Christine Schurer. Christine, a historian from Hanover, cultivated an air of intellect and worldliness. But underneath, she was a desperate soul, hungry for validation. For Torgny, it was a fling, a 2-week encounter in the sun. For Christine, it was a foundation. When Torgny ended the affair and returned to his real life in Sweden, her world cracked. She refused to accept the rejection. She unleashed a torrent of emails and phone calls. She was persistent. She was obsessive. When Torgny finally managed to cut off contact, her obsession curdled into resentment. To her, this was not a breakup. It was a cosmic betrayal. The sense of abandonment drove her to repeated suicide attempts. She felt wronged by a Swedish man. But rather than dealing with the pain, she targeted the source of her renewed bitterness, the happiness of the man who had dared to move on. In the summer of 2007, Christine moved to Stockholm. She found an apartment in the suburb of Skarpnäck. Her presence in Sweden was not for a new career, but for one single, chilling purpose: Torgny Helgren. She stalked him. She watched. And when she saw him settling into a stable, loving family unit with Emma, Max, and Saga, the sight became unbearable. The jealousy was a physical sickness. Emma and her children were no longer people. They were obstacles. They were symbols of the life that should have been hers. She began to plan the method, the timing, the target. It was all calculated. She had to locate the small, unassuming house in the center of Sweden. She had to learn the routineness of this family. Police records later proved that Christine took the 100-mile journey from Stockholm to Arboga on at least 2 separate occasions in the days before the attack. March 12th and March 14th, 2008. She was mapping the kill zone. She was doing her homework. And on the 3rd trip, she wouldn't be leaving empty-handed. She would leave nothing behind but devastation. Monday, March 17th, 2008. The Arboga house was quiet. Torgny was not yet home. Emma was upstairs, preparing for the night. Down the hall, Max and Saga were asleep in their rooms, safe, they believed, in their own beds. Christine arrived in Arboga in the late afternoon. She was methodical. She was armed. She carried a weapon chosen for its blunt efficiency, a hammer. She moved through the small town, a dark shadow against the white snow, heading straight for Emma's home. At approximately 8:40 p.m., the silence of the evening was broken by a sound that changes everything, a knock on the door. Emma opened it, expecting nothing more than a neighbor or a delivery. She was met not by a familiar face, but by a stranger, a German woman with an unsettling intensity. In that fleeting moment, before the violence erupted, the killer's face was imprinted on Emma's mind, a flicker of recognition she would later struggle to recall, yet a face she would never, ever forget. The attack was immediate. It was savage. It was absolute. Christine surged inside, and the hammer began to fall. Not once, not twice, 15 times. Blow after blow rained down on Emma's head. The act of sheer, unrestrained rage, intended for one sole purpose, murder. Emma collapsed, her consciousness instantly shattered, her life force draining onto the floor of her own home. But Christine's malice was not satisfied. She had come to eliminate the family, root and branch. She walked past the prone body of Emma and proceeded down the hall toward the rooms of the children. She entered the children's rooms, a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, defenseless and asleep, and she brought the hammer down on their little heads. The violence was precise. It was focused. It was the complete, cold-blooded destruction of 2 innocent lives. Having completed her terrible work, Christine did not linger. She melted back into the night, boarding a train for Stockholm, carrying the dark secret and shedding the hammer somewhere along the way. She left no trace of herself but the carnage. No confession, no DNA. She was a ghost again. Minutes after she was gone, Tournay arrived home. He opened the door. The sight that greeted him was unspeakable. His partner, Emma, lay bleeding on the floor, barely alive. The children silent. In a state of terror and disbelief, Tournay scrambled for the phone, calling the emergency services. His frantic voice cutting through the deadly silence. The small house was instantly overwhelmed by paramedics and police. Emma was rushed to the hospital in Venterus. Immediately placed in a medically induced coma, her survival was uncertain. But for the children, there was no hope left to grasp. Max, only 3, died upon arrival. Saga, the beautiful 1-year-old, fought through the night, but her fragile body succumbed to the trauma the following day, March 18th. The Arboga family was annihilated, and the killer was already boarding a plane back to Germany. The Swedish police were facing a nightmare scenario: 2 dead children, a critically injured mother in a coma, no weapon, and a prime suspect already out of the country. The early hours were defined by confusion. The children's biological father was initially detained, a procedural necessity quickly dismissed when his alibi held. The police were hunting a phantom. The entire case rested on circumstantial evidence. No DNA, no fingerprints. A deliberate killer who cleaned up her tracks. But the police had a name whispered by Tournay: Christine Schura, the jealous ex, the obsessed former fling. Detective began constructing a timeline, a slow, patient process of building a wall of proof, brick by cold brick. They tracked her movement from Germany to Stockholm, and critically, they found evidence of her stalking the prior. Suspicious train trips to Arboga on the 12th and 14th of March. Then, the breakthrough. Surveillance footage from the Arboga railway station on the evening of the 17th. There she was, the profile, the timing, the hasty departure, confirmed by a local taxi driver who placed her in the town. The ghost was materializing. Christine was detained in Germany on March 22nd. She denied everything, claiming she had never heard of Arboga. But the German police extracted a crucial sample, her DNA. It was rushed across the continent to Swedish forensic scientists. But as the police built a circumstantial case, the ultimate witness was fighting for her life. Emma remained unconscious, her brain battling to heal itself. Without a positive identification, the case against Christine, though strong, could be torn apart by a defense attorney claiming mistaken identity. Then, at the end of March, the fog began to lift. Emma woke up. She emerged from the coma with devastating injuries and a terrifying gap in her memory. Her mind had blocked the trauma. The police waited. Cautiously, could she remember the face that stood at her door? When the photo of Christine was presented to her, the memory, a tiny splinter of consciousness, broke through. Despite the darkness and the violence, that face was seared into her mind. Emma confirmed it. That is the woman. The last layer of protection for the killer had evaporated. On March 30th, the arrest warrant was signed. The wheels of extradition turned. Christine was coming back to Sweden. She was going to face the woman she tried to kill. The trial began in August 2008 in the Västerås District Court. The nation was desperate for answers, desperate for justice. In the courtroom, Christine was ice. She was emotionless. She was defiant. She pleaded not guilty to 2 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. She sat at the defendant's table, maintaining an expression of bizarre detachment, often observed smiling or chuckling during testimony. She denied any knowledge of the town, the children, or the crime. The prosecution's case was a masterpiece of investigative tenacity. They showed the court the digital paper trail of her obsession. They presented their surveillance footage from the Arboga station. They marched 50 witnesses to a stand, all pointing to the presence of the German woman in the small, unfamiliar town on the day the children died. But the emotional heart of the prosecution, the devastating moment that broke the courtroom's composure, was the testimony of Emma. Emma, having survived the unspeakable, entered the court. She stood before the woman who had bludgeoned her and killed her babies, Max and Saga. Her identification was powerful, absolute, and tearful. It was the surviving victim confronting the unrepentant killer. The defense attorney fought hard, arguing that a circumstantial case without the weapon or forensic DNA was insufficient, and that Emma's memory was compromised by her trauma. But the court saw the totality, the obsession, the detailed planning, the presence, and the identification. All facts led to one inevitable conclusion. Christine Schurer was found guilty on all charges. The court then demanded a psychiatric evaluation. Was she severely mentally ill? Could she be held fully accountable? Christine, consistent in her defiance, refused to cooperate. She blocked the evaluation, maintaining a stony silence. The court took this refusal, coupled with the clear, chilling premeditation of the hammer attack, as proof of her criminal intent. She was judged to be in full possession of her faculties. She was judged to be a cold-blooded killer. On October 14, 2008, the court handed down the sentence: life imprisonment. The verdict was a solemn declaration that the law had seen through the killer's elaborate charade of innocence. She had intended to destroy the family and walk away clean. Instead, she earned a sentence of life for a crime of pure, toxic, unmitigated jealousy. Christine was later transferred to Germany to serve her sentence, but her fate was sealed. The Arboga murders remain a dark stain on the soul of Sweden. A constant reminder that sometimes the greatest dangers are not strangers in the dark, but the obsessed shadows we never knew were watching. And while justice was served, the ultimate cost remains unimaginable. Emma survived to tell the story, but her children, Max and Saga, were taken away by a senseless malice, an obsession that devoured their innocent lives. When the hammer fell in Arboga, it was meant to silence Emma forever. She had been struck 15 times in a furious, calculated attempt to annihilate the symbol of her killer's jealousy. But the human spirit, even when fractured, can possess a relentless, unexpected resilience. Emma's survival was a magical miracle, secured through weeks of intensive care and a medically induced coma. Her recovery was not a soft Hollywood ending. It was a grueling, agonizing journey defined by physical rehabilitation and the slow, terrifying work of mental reconstruction. She suffered severe head injuries and deep psychological trauma, yet she found the strength not only to heal but to testify. Her memory of the killer's face serving as the unshakable foundation for the prosecution's case. The conviction of Christine in October 2008 closed one chapter, but it left an unfillable void in Emma's world. Max and Saga were gone. The home they shared was stained by unspeakable violence. Her life, as she knew it, was over. She was left to carry the immense, crushing weight of grief alongside the daily struggle of physical recovery. For a mother who had lost everything, to pass forward required a strength few could imagine. Emma chose to channel the strength not into perpetual victimhood, but into a determined pursuit of a new normalcy, a testament to her refusal to let the killer claim every part of her future. In the years that followed the trial, Emma gradually began the arduous process of rebuilding her life. Brick by painful brick, she had to disentangle her future from the shadow of the one woman who defined the Arboga tragedy, Christine Schara. The decision to seek happiness again, to love, to marry, to bear children, was not an act of forgetting Max and Saga, but an act of defiance against the cruelty that took them. Emma eventually found the courage to embrace new life. She remarried, and, in the years that followed, she welcomed two new children into her world. This family unit became her anchor. It was a conscious choice to recreate new memories, new joy, and a new meaning in her life that had been so brutally ravaged by senseless jealousy. She has maintained her public presence with quiet dignity, occasionally speaking to the media to ensure that her children, Max and Saga, are remembered not for the horror of the deaths, but for the beauty of their short lives. Her advocacy, subtle but persistent, has stood as a constant reminder of the injustice, while her personal life became a powerful, living symbol of survival. Emma proved that extreme malice can wound and destroy, but it cannot steal their entire future. Her life after the incident is a profound story of resilience, a quiet triumph over a darkness that tried and failed to break her completely. She moved forward, carrying the memory of her lost children, but never allowing her killer to dictate the destiny of her heart.